welcome to the Sydney Policy Lab's annual lecture. This evening we meet together on very beautiful Gadi country, and I wish to acknowledge traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and we'll be privileged to have Professor Michelle Dixon offer an acknowledgement of country shortly. I would also like to acknowledge members of the broader Sydney community, fellows of the Senate, Vice-Chancellor, colleagues and students gathered here this evening. We are grateful to have you join us this evening and to be here at the Sibyl Centre at the Women's College. Later this evening, we're looking forward to time for questions at the conclusion of this evening's lecture. You can see the slide up here now with a QR code, and you'll be able to submit questions during the lecture by scanning the QR code on the screen or visiting the link. I say this now because you might have a question that comes to mind, and please do feel free to submit that as you go. When the Sydney Policy Lab holds events, we gather with curiosity and respect for different points of view, so we kindly ask you that your questions share that spirit. I'm grateful that Professor Michelle Dixon will lead us in an acknowledgement of country this evening. Professor Dixon is a Darkinjung Ngarigo Aboriginal Australian. Michelle is Deputy Head of the School of Public Health in the Faculty of Medicine and Health here at the University of Sydney. Michelle is also Director of the Posh Centre for Indigenous Health, which undertakes research to influence policy, practice and systems in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Kaju and good evening, colleagues. It's an honour to be able to stand here and offer a beautiful acknowledgement of country, acknowledging that we come together tonight on Gadigal country. This land has been carefully cared for and nurtured for many, many generations by the people who live and love country in many different ways. When I acknowledge country, I acknowledge something deeply important in the way we hold ourselves in the work that we do. Acknowledging country is not just a formality, it's an authentic pause. It's an intentional pause that we can all make together in a collective space to acknowledge the privilege we all have living here on Gadigal, or meeting here tonight on Gadigal country. Personally, I want to pay my respects to the leadership and the care that has been offered to Gadigal country here through many generations. Particularly want to pay respect to those who have led us through those generations in the past, those who are leading us now. And importantly, I want to acknowledge any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues in the room and pay my respect to country that you acknowledge as your place or your places. My places are Darkinjung country, Central Coast, and Ngarigo country, which is the Snowy Mountains region, two quite different parts of New South Wales. But I live here, and I'm very proud to live on Gadigal country and work on Gadigal country. And I was raised as a very urban Aboriginal Koori woman. When I acknowledge country, I also think about what that means to me as an Aboriginal academic. I've worked at the University of Sydney for 15 years, and I've seen so many changes. But I've also seen things that have stayed the same. And one of the things that absolutely holds me every day is walking onto campus and spending some time looking at the beautiful Gadi trees that are right outside the building that currently is my office space in the Edward Ford building. Beautiful Gadi trees that I pause and I just touch every time I walk into that building. And yes, sometimes I get some strange looks from people, but that's fine. But in that moment, before I race in the door and I turn on my computer or I jump onto a Zoom meeting, in that moment, I'm acknowledging country at the start of every day here. It's a practice, I think, that I invite you all to engage in, looking around our beautiful campus and noticing what's been made possible here on Gadigal country. So tonight we come together to explore many things, but acknowledging country in this way brings us together in a relational connection. And that's an important part of starting this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michelle. It's my privilege now to introduce the Chancellor of the University of Sydney, David Thodey, AO. On the 1st of July last year, David became the 19th Chancellor of the University of Sydney. He's widely recognised for his contributions over 30 years to science and technology, business, public service and the community, with significant experience in driving startups, large companies and public sector bodies. An advocate for the real-world impact of research translation, David is known for prioritising people across all the fields he has worked in and is dedicated to delivering a great experience for our students and staff and great partnerships beyond the university. In addition to his role as Chancellor, he is currently Chair of Xero and Ramsay Healthcare. And prior to becoming Chancellor, he had been a member of the University's Senate's Finance Committee. Just this month, he began serving on the Reserve Bank of Australia's new governance board. He is passionate about environmental sustainability and co-chairs the Great Barrier Reef Foundation and is also co-chair of the Climate Leaders Coalition. His previous roles include serving as Chief Executive of IBM Australia and New Zealand and Telstra and as Chair of the CSIRO. David is active in public policy and led an independent review of the Australian Public Service. He also chaired a New South Wales Government review of federal financial relations. Most recently, he led a user audit of the MyGov Government Services digital portal. In 2020, he was Deputy Chair of the Federal Government's National COVID-19 Coordination Commission Advisory Board, supporting the government to navigate the challenges faced during the early stages of the pandemic. David is an officer in the General Division of the Order of Australia for Ethical Business Leadership. He's been awarded an honorary doctorate in Science and Technology from Deakin University, an honorary doctorate of Business from the University of Technology, Sydney, and the University of Sydney. This evening, he will deliver the Sydney Policy Lab's annual lecture on the topic of building trust in public institutions, for which I'm very grateful. Please join me in welcoming the Chancellor.
Good evening, and Kate, thank you very much for that very warm welcome. It's a real pleasure to be here and to see so many people here. And Michelle, thank you for that welcome to country, and I feel a part of being here, which is really great. And let me also just pay my respect to the Gadi people and pay my respect to elders past and present. It is interesting as we live in these uncertain times, it's good to have something to come back to. And I think welcome to country is so important. But I'm also conscious that we've been on these lands, or the Indigenous people have been here for many thousands of years, sharing knowledge and learning. So I hope tonight we can do a little bit of that together as we look at this wonderful topic of building trust in public institutions. Well, I should start by saying trust is one of those things that's getting scarcer and scarcer in today's world. And I see declining trust in organisations and leaders, in our government processes, and I see it everywhere. And it concerns me. I was looking at some data around this. In America, just last year during the election, I think that there was this prevailing feeling amongst young people that they had lost confidence in American leadership. More than 2.5 million Australians, including my wife, refused to sign up to the digital health record because they felt unsafe about the data and would they trust someone else to manage that data. And then in the 25 Alderman Trust Barometer, which was just released in January, fascinating statistics, 61% of respondents have a moderate or high sense of grievance, 61%. defined by a belief that government and business make their lives harder and serve narrow interests, and wealthy people benefit unfairly in the system. It's not great, is it? And while universities remain more trusted maybe than government and businesses, we are also not immune from these challenges as we endeavour to try to make a difference. And in this fast-moving geopolitical world, we're seeing greater polarisation and we're seeing more challenges, and universities are right at the heart of that. So as I said, this trust decline is concerning because trust and truth go together. And if we lose truth, if we lose that objectivity, we end up saying what we believe or what we want to believe, and everything becomes relative, and then we go into a downward spiral. So when Kate asked me to give the lecture tonight, I think I was happy, but then I thought about it and I said, I'm not sure I'm really happy about giving this lecture, but I'm delighted to be here and I'm pleased to have the opportunity. But I do want to stress, I don't sense that I'm an expert around, building trust in public institutions. I have been involved working for institutions that suffered from a lack of trust, but I'm not an expert in this area. But I do want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I see that I think we can do better. And I did read Kate's very good article that she wrote with the colleague from RMIT, and it was all about what do universities owe communities. And the one thing that struck me in the article, and she talked around, in Australia we have public hospitals, we have public schools, but we never talk about a public university, and yet what is this university? It is a public university, and I found that very interesting. So I think it's worth pursuing, where universities sit in this continuum and how we can build trust in this environment. So what I thought I'd do tonight is just share three things, and I'll try not to go on too long. Just want to share a few personal reflections on what I think involves trust. I think I'd then like to just talk a little bit about what it means to the University of Sydney, and then use a couple of examples from what Kate mentioned in the jobs I've had in my career, and try to sort of draw some parallels around how you build trust and see if we've got any learnings that come out, and then we can have some Q&A and you can tell me the truth about what's really involved. So just some personal observations about trust. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious, but trust emanates from being trustworthy. Trust emanates from being trustworthy. And when you really start to unpick that, there are some characteristics around what a trustworthy individual or organisation looks like. Firstly, trust is built on integrity, and it is also built on truth. You have to be committed to pursuing truth and acting with integrity if you are going to be considered trustworthy. And of course, that's not what we always see in society. And these attributes of a personal organisation are very hard to win and incredibly easy to lose, as you all know. The second aspect is that trustworthy people show respect and openness, as do great organisations. And they do that in the pursuit of truth, into getting to the right answer for the right solution. So to be worthy of trust, you also need to respect different opinions. You need to be involved in different perspectives, and this requires a culture of transparency and mutual respect. And often that is not the case. Often it is the loudest voice that often wins the day. And another condition, I think, around what really constitutes a trustworthy organisation is the ability to listen. And that has been a theme that has come out of the centre here. Because listening enables empathy. It shows that you care about an issue or an individual. And to be considered trustworthy, you need to be able to listen more than you speak. And yet in this very noisy world that we live in, everyone wants to have a voice. And maybe that's something we can, reflect on during the Q&A. And my final ingredient or aspect around being trustworthy is the necessity to act. You can possess all these characteristics. You can have integrity, trust, truth, but unless you're willing to act, unless you're willing to actually take action on what you believe, people have a very acute sense of what is right, or as we say, in the BS factor. So you really need to be able to stand strong, irrespective of whether you get personal gain or loss, as the case may be. So I think that these aspects of integrity, respect, openness, listening and learning are critical, and together with acting in terms of creating a trustworthy organisation. So let me now just turn a little bit to building trust in public institutions like a university. And as Kate said, I'm just about at the 12-month period of being Chancellor of this wonderful university. And every day I learn more about, the wonderful people here. And I've been incredibly impressed with the work that the people, our academics, our amazing students, and all the staff that work so diligently across this university. However, it has been a challenging year. And Mark didn't talk to me about some of these challenges. And as I reflected in the inaugural address that I gave in spring last year, I talked around what the sector was facing. And I think these challenges are not just limited to the University of Sydney, it's across all universities, but also we're seeing it in the US now, the Trump early stages, and we're being impacted by some of these directives around research funding, and I think it's even coming here into the university here. So many universities around the world, really didn't anticipate a lot of the change that was happening. And of course, the conflict in the Middle East, came a little bit of a surprise, though, when you reflect back, you could see it happening, but not to the extent that we thought. And here at the university, we're not really ready for a lot of the outpouring of deeply felt, positions around the conflict in Gaza. And we didn't get it all right, and I think Mark says that. But we got a lot right as well. But through all that period, despite all the challenges, the one confidence that I had, I knew what the university and the leadership team stood for. Their overarching commitment to create a safe, welcoming, inclusive campus where people can express their views respectfully without, degenerating into hate speech and, bigotry and racism. So my confidence was not in what we did, but it was what the people stood for. And I think that's a really important aspect of when you start to think around what trustworthiness really does entail. They were committed to listen, that word listen again. And while I'm sure that we will experience many more external challenges that will come from places we do not expect, the important thing is I know what this university stands for. And that what we stand for will actually take us through the difficult periods. And I think this is why values and purpose-driven organisations right around the world have taken on a new meaning, probably over the last 6 or 7 years. Not all the tech companies, by the way, I'm talking more generally. Because you can't build trust externally unless it's experienced from internally. So this consistency matters about the clarity of mission, the clarity of purpose are absolutely essential, and to being clear about what your organisation stands for. And I think if we had more organisations that were clear about this, I think we would have greater trust in our public institutions. And I think it gets straight, to the issue of leadership. But let me leave universities for a moment, and let me now talk a little bit about my experiences at Telstra, and we're in a review of the Australian Public Service. Now, for those who don't know, I was at Telstra for 15 years, and everybody knows Telstra in some way, usually. The punchline of what I'm going to tell you is that in a period of 5 years, and it was roughly 5 years, the organisation went from being rated as probably one of the most disliked companies in Australia, and let me assure you, it was disliked, to being voted the most respected company in 2014. So 2009, it was definitely not top of the pops, and by 2014, it was voted as the most respected company in Australia. Its brand was the most valuable brand. Now, when you in business, the brand value relates to the overall value of the brand in terms of over and above the financial performance of the company, and it was in the top 100 globally. I mean, an amazing story, really. And so I should make some disclaimers before I just tell you a little bit about it. I mean, every organisation is different, so there's no magic answer here, and I don't want to imply that Telstra got it completely right, because obviously it's not a perfect organisation. And it was a team of people that made the difference. It wasn't any one individual. And there were many factors, time, the nature of what the business was, the politics of the day, they all played a factor. So you've got to be very careful. You can't necessarily just take, this magic formula and apply it here. But let me tell you the story. So Telstra was sort of like a public institution. I mean, it had, 60,000 people. It had access to, 8 million homes across Australia. Wonderful people, by the way, who went into, I think our engineers visited 50,000 homes every day. And remember, when you go into someone's home, there's an enormous opportunity to make a difference or not to make a difference. And of course, you would never have to wait at home for 4 hours and the technician then to ring you at 12 o'clock and say, well, I can't make it today. But anyway, that was some of the challenges we had. But it was a part of everybody's life. And so it was like a public organisation. We took 500,000 calls to our call centres every day. We had, 4 million hits on the website. It was at a scale that often you don't think about. So when we started out on this journey, and I remember everybody had a Telstra story. They were never good. So you'd ask people where they worked. They'd say, oh, I work for telecommunications, never say quite Telstra. So we weren't in a good place. But let me take you through the steps that we went through and see if there's any, points we can take out. So in 2009, I can remember being at a meeting a little bit like this. It was a lot of people, and we were trying to look at what was our vision for the company. Should it be to be the most valuable company in Australia? Should it be the most innovative, etc.? It was really interesting. What the vision for the company we came up with was to be the most admired, respected and trusted telco in Australia. Now, that may not sound very... This is a company that is driven by share price, by shareholders, and we were saying we want to be the most admired, respected and trusted company, because we fundamentally believe that if we got that right, all those other things would flow from there. And it was quite a big sort of moment in terms of a lot of people, engineers, business people, tough, wanting to go out there and change the world. And here we were saying that we wanted not to be the biggest company, not to be, the best, the most innovative, but to be trusted and admired. So that was number one. The second thing we decided, that we wanted to put the customer at the heart of everything we do. Now, you may say, well, what does that mean to our topic tonight? Well, it was actually about a culture of service. It was about being willing to put yourself at risk to serve your customer. And for us, we had a lot of customers for sure. So this was a significant change. I mean, I can remember when I became CEO, I used to get 60 complaint letters on my desk every day, and they were new complaint letters. And I then ended up having to get a whole team to sort of respond, because I said, no, we're going to respond within 24 hours to every complaint we get, and we're going to care about every customer, every customer. And that was a big cultural change, but it changed the way we thought about things, because this was about trust. You know, if you complain to someone and then they do nothing about it, guess what happens? You have no trust in them at all. Now, these are not necessarily big, philosophical things. These are about hard-fought value creation, and it was a big change. The third thing was we looked at our culture and our values, and I've talked about this, at other forums, but it was really important that we got those right, in terms of what we stood for. And we had to go from a transition, because when you're a big, complex organisation, you sort of get a bit arrogant. I never say the university was arrogant, but you get a bit arrogant. And you sort of say, well, I built this great product, you should have it, and be very grateful for it. So changing that culture from arrogance to service, from being all these sort of individual parts of a big organisation to saying, no, we all stand, whether you like it or not, for Telstra. So when people went out, and just like everyone who works here at the University of Sydney, you might work in a different area, but you have University of Sydney on it. So we stand together in whether you like it or not, we do. And we had to go from telling to listening, from being an incumbent, slow-moving bureaucratic, which we are not at the university, to being sort of fast-moving, innovative and driving. But that was part of the change we had to go through, and people started to see a difference. By the way, the next area, you do need to keep bringing innovative product and solutions into the market, because if you don't, you're not changing the perception. So, just like us at the university, we need to keep bringing innovative, courses and doing new research work that keeps people on their edge a bit, saying, oh, gee, there's something different over there. And then lastly was around leadership. And this was actually probably the hardest thing we did, was about what was our leadership brand? What did we stand for as a leadership group? What made the Telstra manager really unique? By the way, one of the features of a Telstra manager is they're very analytical, because most of them are engineers, which is great, and sort of knowing that and being able to take it forward. So this was a big change, and it really did change the way people thought about themselves. It changed the way stakeholders thought about us and customers. So this, ended up being, going from being one of the most disliked companies to being one of the most respected, which was, it took me by surprise, to be quite honest, and it was an amazing change. So what I'm saying is it is possible. So when you ask the question, can we restore trust in public institutions? Yes, we can. But it isn't highfalutin ideas, it's about actually hard, disciplined, rigorous work to get the things right. It was a little bit the same with Australian Public Service, which we did a review. That was with Glyn Davis in 2019. We thought a lot about what did the public service. So, many of you may have worked in the public service. What a great group of people. They serve us, every day, from Services Australia to Transport New South Wales. They are part of who we are. But so often we do not, really reflect or recognise their great contribution. So the title of the actual report, which we went to Scott Morrison at the time, was A Trusted Australian Public Service United in Serving All Australians. And, I can remember having in a group in Canberra with probably, 1,000 people in the room, and there was sort of this deathly silence, but there was suddenly, it's sort of a bit of a rumble, and they started to feel that sort of meaning about they could be something different, because if you're in the public service, you often get a lot of criticism. You don't get a lot of recognition. And so it was really a rally cry, and it's still today, even though unfortunately it's called the Thodey report. It should never have been called the Thodey report. It was a report on the APS. It's still very real down there, and it's about how they become a trusted institution. So I think that these things are instructional for us, in terms of this question around trustworthiness, about integrity, about, creating a learning environment, about respect, and also about taking action. So it can work. And I wanted to tell those stories because I think it's important that we are grounded in reality. And does it sound familiar to what Mark and the team are trying to do here at the University of Sydney? And this was not a pre-recorded or pre-meditated presentation. Here we are. We have a deep purpose at this university to be, trusted as an institution serving the needs of the New South Wales community. That's our number one objective. Our commitment to academic excellence and a brilliant student experience. That is absolutely key to what we want to do. Our priority of research, leadership, and an innovative culture, this cultural change. And then our commitment to values of excellence, trust, and accountability. So trust is a part of who we want to be. And then the new Leadership Academy that's been established to building this unique, University of Sydney brand. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here, working with Mark and the leadership team to see what we collectively can do to take this university on its next stage, its next stage of building trust, of being different, with all the challenges we've got. And I think that we can do it, and it's inspiring. So, but, we can talk about internal change, and it is, of course, foundational, but we can't stop there because we need to keep looking externally. Kate told me about a book by Ronald Daniels, and he was the president of Johns Hopkins University, called What Universities Own Democracy. Daniels borrowed from Lyndon Johnson to say universities have to be able to walk and chew gum, it's a very American saying at the same time, and says there is no reason that a university cannot simultaneously pursue both inward and outward-looking reforms. And I think he's right. So while the university, quite rightly, is focused under our current strategy on changes to improve the experience of students, we are not doing this as a means and its end. We're doing it as a means to make a difference in the communities that we serve externally. So by improving these experiences, we are better able to serve the communities around us. And that's always been the driving purpose of this university for 175 years, and especially in times of significant change. And we do have a responsibility to the wider community. As I said a little before, we've got to find these positive ways to, create trust in this institution. And in that context, I was also taken by something Rachel Botsman said in a recent podcast. Now, she is someone who's written and looked at trust for a long time. She's at Oxford Said Business School. And she says, whereas many might define trust as knowing what to expect, she sees it as a confident relationship with the unknown. And I sort of like that because she's suggesting that these high levels of trust will allow you to better navigate the future. And we need help to navigate the future because we don't know what the future will come. But we do know if you do it in the right way, we can make a difference. So that brings me all the way back to the last point that I made at the beginning about action. To build trust, to become trustworthy, your actions have to count. And too often we talk too much and we don't act. We're not brave enough or courageous enough to give it a go. And I think we need to be more courageous. And I think the university has a great opportunity to do that because we touch so many people every day. And In every moment of truth that we have, there is an opportunity to create a brilliant experience for a student, for someone we deal with, and I think this is what is so important in creating this inclusive environment, great education, no matter what we do. So that brings me just to the end. So what I've tried to do tonight is just sort of paint a pretty broad picture about, trust comes from being trustworthy, about these, characteristics of integrity, respect, openness, listening and learning and acting. But it must be about us. Change starts with us, not out there. It's not other people's faults, it's what we do that makes a difference. And I think from the Telstra story and the Australian Public Service story, there you can get a little bit of an insight why purpose, culture, values, alignment is so important. Because this does matter. It matters a lot. And because trust is essential in allowing us all to realise our full potential. And just in finishing, a final thought. I do believe that we can restore trust in public organisations if we're grounded in these values. Dale Carnegie said, trust is about delivering on excellence and is founded on serving the communities around us. You see, it's about service. And we can restore trust in our public institutions if we're willing to hold ourselves accountable. And accountability is a word that is not used enough. And universities like the University of Sydney play such an important role in being leaders in that pursuit of knowledge and truth, upholding these principles of academic excellence, principles of freedom of speech, democratic society, and of course, service. Service to students and service to the communities around us. Thank you very much.
I had so many questions listening to your lecture then, as you get some water. And as people submit their questions using that QR code online, something that came to mind for me was you've been in the office of Chancellor now for almost a year. And I'm really keen to hear, as you've gotten out and about around the university and met with partners, how have some of your assumptions about the place been challenged, and what questions are you now asking?
I think what's amazed me more around the university that I didn't realise is just the breadth and the scale of the university. I've been taken with, obviously, the faculties and the schools, but it's the diversity of research we do, the way we interact with the community, and that has been incredibly, inspiring for me personally. The problem with the Chancellor, you can't get around to see them all, so that has been really impressive. I think as well, on the negative side, I worry that this commitment to consultation causes us to move too slowly. And at the pace I see in society, now I'm not saying, irresponsible pace, I'm saying just making decisions and getting on with it everything gets re-prosecuted too much in a university. And I think there's times you just got to make a decision, do the consultation and then get on with it. And I think often we re-prosecute. And of course the world, our role as a university is changing, society's changing. Even the view of having a degree or being a postdoc, it's a little bit different to what it was a decade ago. So I think we've got to keep reinventing ourselves, not to lose our heart, because it is wonderful what we have, but we've got to reinvent ourselves to make sure we are relevant and we're moving forward and we are truly making a difference and holding that mirror up to ourselves to say, are we or aren't we? And we're no different to any big organisation. You can get caught up in ourselves a lot. So I think that'd be some of the reflections I've got. But the people are incredible. Just incredibly talented people all across this wonderful university. Yeah.
More questions have come through as we've heard some of those reflections that you've had as you've gotten to know more of the people here. There's been one question that's come through, which is that accountability for us here at the university sits next to our value of trust. And so there's a question, what's the relationship there between trust and accountability? Is there more that can be done to ensure accountability for the university, and I guess to whom?
Yeah, I think trust and accountability go together. We had a value at Telstra was trust each other to deliver, because you can't trust somebody or an institution if they aren't true to what they say they're going to do. So accountability goes very, sort of the opposite side really of trust, and I think that trust and accountability starts between us and look, I don't think that the university has a particular problem in that area, but it is a very important thing. And I've heard a lot about, over Christmas I read a lot of books around university, the history of universities, and this horrible thing called managerialism that was coming into universities. And of course I probably embody managerialism because I come from the private sector. But I think I worry that that's the wrong interpretation of running something well, of being efficient and rigorous and disciplined, just like every academic is in the work they do. So managerialism, I understand the negativity of that, but there is this sense of accountability, of being willing to step out and take risk, do things. You take risk every day in the research you do. So accountability and trust, really do go well together, I think.
So perhaps not highly recommended Christmas holiday reading, but you heard it here first. And perhaps in future we're going to have a Chancellor's bookshelf or something like that shared in staff news. There have been more questions that have come in, which is wonderful to see. And someone said they'd like to return to that question of a public university rolling off the tongue. And I guess the question is, how do we enable that to happen more easily? And they've got a follow-on question, how do we get governments to do the listening and trust that the work we do here as researchers and educators is worth supporting and indeed funding?
Right. Well, there's no easy answer to that question. I think trust and respect comes from doing what you do really well, and being confident in that and consistent and making a difference. And, it's very interesting. Look, I've got a lot of good friends who are politicians. At the end of the day, they will go where there is, life, things are going well. That's just the nature of what being a politician is. So if we stand up and make a difference, they will come and they will listen. And I think sitting here waiting for them to come to us is not going to work. So we need to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, be good at it, and then they will start knocking on the door and saying, gee, there's something different at the University of Sydney. And a lot of the negativity, around international students, around salaries, that'll all go away because it's what we make it, it's the difference we make. And I think we've got to talk about these issues more. I think we sort of hide behind them a bit. And, so that's what would be my view on it. And so the work you're doing here at the centre, I think is wonderful. It is about, things that they should care about, and we should be talking about it more.
It definitely wows me every day to just find the work that's going on across this university and just what researchers are undertaking, how they're listening to communities, how they're taking the lead from communities about the work that matters. And it's a shared job, isn't it? Getting that to be known.
It's actually hard to find out everything that's going on. So that's where AI might help. We can do a little bit of what's going on today. But it's just an incredible breadth. And that's expected in a university because you've got bright people doing wonderful things. So, yeah.
Well, funny you should mention AI because we have a question, not unexpectedly, on how do technology and trust interact. The person asking the question says the UK Civil Service announced sweeping investments in AI recently, but trust strikes me as something fundamentally human, they say.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I have some mistrust of AI algorithms because I actually don't know what every algorithm does. And so I think we haven't quite worked out how to authenticate algorithms to make them always trustworthy. Now, there are a lot of really good algorithms, and, of course, the algorithms are only as good as the data that they're working off, etc. So I do think it is a difficult set of challenges we have as we work through this, but it shouldn't stop us trying because, computational power, large language models, these new AI agents are incredible in what they're doing, and we should be leaning in. But there is a degree of we've got to somehow authenticate them to make them trustworthy as we go forward. I'm not sure anyone's found an answer to that. There's been a couple of attempts to get every algorithm to be signed off by somebody, so it's sort of like a book and say, well, there's ownership. I'm not sure that's going to work because it's just too difficult. But, if I was involved in Services Australia, they're using, sort of a Gen AI analytical product to help the consultants on the phone when they're interpreting, complex social policy to give better advice to someone who's on the phone. And I mean, they, I think, have made the right decision that any bot that gives any information can never do it without a human involved. So I think keeping humanity in the mix is really important because you need to be able to interpret what is that. And as you know, anyone who's used ChatGPT, it's not always right, is it? And it's only as good as the data. And if you try ChatGPT or even Copilot, it actually learns and it gets better and better as you use it. Or Genesis, it doesn't matter which product you're using. So I think that it is something we need to keep, really leaning into. I think we can get there. I think, there's some pretty clever people there. But I do think we should be a little bit wary as we go forward. Yeah.
And it strikes me it's a real area of dynamic research here at the university.
Yeah.
Just speaking today with researchers who are working on how generative AI may be interpreted for people who really need to access services in a vulnerable position. It's very interesting.
I'm really pleased that that we are, saying we want people to use, AI, Gen AI, but also declare it, be open about it, etc. And I think that's going to, put us in a good position. So I think it's a really good step forward.
So one of the things that really fascinated me about, I know we shouldn't call it this, but the Thodey review, was the point that was made about the actual touch points that people have with the public service. That they are in acts like renewing your licence, in accessing a Medicare benefit, and that's led on to subsequent work that you've done. The thing that's striking about a university is who comes into contact with the university, and we've got a question here about what stake do you think the public feel that they have in the trustworthiness of a university, and how do we earn trust from people who never interact with us?
Right. You see, I know that we interact with only a percentage of the community, probably more than we actually realise. However, you look at the multiplier effect of, 1 degree of separation. Every student, or 70,000 of them, have an opinion about university. Let's say every university student and our staff talk to 10 people. And so you go 10 times 80,000, there's 1 million people immediately. So I think we underestimate just the impact that we have on, the greater community. And I mean, I'm out at dinner and, people have an opinion about University of Sydney, and they may or may not have ever been here, but they've got an opinion, and that's come from someone. So I think our impact and our footprint is far greater than what we realise. So those moments of truth, how you interact, how you say, well, I'm from University of Sydney and it's a great place to be, it's incredibly innovative, there's wonderful things happening, that makes a difference. If it's true. If it's not true, you should say something. But I do think that comes from this inner culture about what you're creating. Yeah.
And actually on that subject of students having a whole life beyond the university,
Exactly.
all the communities that they're part of, the networks, we've got a question about the changing lives of students, the modern student having external pressures that have shifted markedly from the turn of the century. And I think about that for myself from the time I was here. Things have changed significantly. Most now work multiple jobs in a dire rental market and have less time for the full experience of on-campus life. And so the question is, to deliver an excellent student experience, can the university be doing more to advocate for students on those external issues that are also shaping their lives?
Well, the short answer is yes. However, to create Mark and I, we were talking this afternoon, and Mark very rightly said, what students look for is a personalised education experience, and I think more than anything else, Mark. And so yes, there's issues out there, but when they come on campus, they want to be treated as an individual. They want to be, know that the education they're getting is in some way tailored to them, maybe challenged as well. So I think that's our number one objective. And obviously to be great educators, to have, challenging courses, really set high standards, because academic excellence is critically important. So I think that's our first obligation, because we can't solve every social issue, but we can do what we do really well. Now, we're challenged with that. We're growing, we've got, different ways of doing things. So I think we've got a lot of work to do there. But if we get that right, I think we can really make a difference. So in terms of the changing needs of the student, and yes, some of them do have 1, 2 jobs, sometimes it's part-time. I think we need to, recognise that and make sure that we've got enough flexibility in how we are providing that education to them in a way that meets their needs. Now, with technology today, there's wonderful ways we can do that, in ways that we, think. But our online technology platform is not bad. It could be a lot better. And so I think we can find ways of meeting people at their point of need. Now, still keeping the personal contact, still creating great value-creating interactions, but that would be what I would like to think we can do, and use technology innovation in a way to really, deliver wonderful, experiences.
We probably have time for another question or two, and this one strikes me as very interesting. It's really asking about, from your perspective as Chancellor, thinking ahead, what steps do you think the university could potentially take in the coming years to become the most trusted university? And how would we know that we're heading in the right direction, that we're building trust?
Well, look, it goes back to what I said in the speech, really. Being trustworthy starts here, not... us going out and saying trust us isn't going to make a lot of difference. But knowing what we stand for and being true to that, that's why our values, of trust, excellence, and accountability are really important. But they can't be just words. We've got to live them. What does it mean to be excellent? And we need to work at that to say what that means for every faculty, every school, every research group, and to be united in that. You watch, I am absolutely convinced that it will change the way people think. By the way, I think we're pretty, there is a lot of trust in the university today. It's just how do we go to another level? And so I don't think there's any magic, way of picking an issue in society that we stand for that's going to change perceptions about us and how we turn up every day. Yeah, would be my view.
I think one of the ways that people expect universities will turn up or show up is to be able to host, at times pretty difficult conversations.
Correct.
And so it's a question, I think universities are places people trust to host those most contentious conversations. How do we make sure we are home to those debates?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of those values of being able to, engage in hard discussions respectfully, listening to other people, and actually, having, doing the hard work to think about what your position is, and, doing the right research. So I think we can be a real bastion and a light in terms of bringing people to have those discussions. And I hope that we continue to do that, because that's what universities are all about, this pursuit of knowledge and the truth. I always add truth, because I do think that this pursuit of what is right is really important. Knowledge for knowledge's sake is sort of, I meet a lot of knowledgeable people. They're not necessarily, making a difference, but people who are committed to making a difference and finding out what is real and then doing something about it, I tell you, they are magical. And, organisations do that are really very special. And there aren't that many of them, really, unfortunately.
And perhaps as we close, you talked about the way that universities need to continue to try to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yes.
It's a challenge I feel deeply. The Sydney Policy Lab is a community-centred, multidisciplinary policy lab. It comes with complexity, but it's going to shape my final question, which is a simple one, which is really, for those of us who are part of this audience, who are part of the university community, how can we contribute to building trust in the institution? And for those of us who are part of the broader community this evening, what can we do to draw on the university's resources to have a confident relationship with an unknown future?
It's a good question. I'm not sure I've got a simple answer to that one. I think that, identifying what you're really good at doing and then being open and, I think, proactive in reaching out into that broader community and being a part of it is a lot to do with it. And then I think trust and knowledge will grow. Being good at what you do is always a good place to start, and already you're starting to do some really good things. I think there's a bigger question as the university as a whole about being clear about what we stand for, that we can all move forward together, and if we do that, then I think that naturally will happen as we go forward. So, and I wish you every success, and I think you're doing great, and we need more of you going forward, so all power to you.
Only done through partnerships, but what a fantastic time to be able to hear thoughts from the Chancellor on how we might build trust in public institutions, to be able to delve into that further through Q&A. And so please join me in thanking the Chancellor. As we do wrap up, I also want to offer my thanks to Professor Michelle Dixon for her acknowledgement of country, to her Associate Professor Meru Shiel and Dr. Asel Masaglova, the co-conveners of the Policy Bite seminar series that happens here on campus at the Policy Lab most Tuesdays during semester. Dr. Tiffany Donnelly and the Women's College, and all at the Sydney Policy Lab and the Office of Global Research Engagement, especially Louise B. Hagg and Max Hall. Please do stay in touch with us and get involved at the Sydney Policy Lab, and you can visit the link on the screen for more information on how to do so. For now, please stay on for conversation and plenty of refreshments. Thank you very much.